We've got just over 5 weeks until the Premier League begins, and we better start asking the question, how the hell do you win FPL? Right, guys, welcome back. This is the Above Average FPL Podcast. My name's Adam, and as always, I'm joined by Baker. Baker, good evening. How you doing, mate?
Good. Almost back. We're almost game launch, maybe. What we 9th of July, timestamping this for this week, maybe? Who knows?
We don't know.
Reveal soon, I guess.
We don't know yet. That voice you may have heard if you're listening on podcast is the wonderful JC. JC, welcome back. How you doing?
Good evening, gents. I'm very good. Yes. Sorry, I got so excited. I started answering before I'd been introduced.
Mate, you're more than welcome to speak whenever you want. It's all good.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Yes, I feel very welcome.
Is this a hat trick? 4 times?
I think it's the hat trick.
I think it's the hat trick.
I can't remember.
I am due to send.
Feels like home.
I'm due to send hat trick balls out to many people already. That's still overdue. I keep getting text messages from Andy North about it, but yeah, we'll get around to it at some point. So we're here to talk about how to win FPL. Have any of us won FPL?
Not yet.
Not
Great
FPL, but versions of fantasy football to various success, including winning. Yes, you.
Me.
What did you win last year?
I won Telegraph Fantasy Football and Ultimate Fantasy Football Manager, which is some mini game that the hub run for. I think that's Telegraph Sky and FPL. Telegraph Sun Dream Team in FPL used to have Sky in it until they got rid of that. So it's like average rank across the
rank across like 3 things, like a triathlon.
Yeah. Fortunately, well, I don't know if it's better or worse. You got to do all 3 at the same time. Triathlon's 1 at a time.
Yeah.
Don't know.
On the same
Which don't know would be better. 3 seasons.
But you have won.
I won a game.
Let's list some achievements in these ones because you play a lot of different games. So Club World Cup's currently going on.
Where
are you? We are at half time in the second semi-final.
Let me just check. Very live updates. Actually, it's on my laptop. This is great content. Here we go.
Great content.
This is what we're about, mate.
The page. I am, drumroll, 9th. I'm 8 points behind Greyhead.
Okay.
Who I'm coming for. You
won the Telegraph.
Where else in the Telegraph did you come?
Where else? Well, I was also 2nd. And I think I was 7th, 13th, and 19th or something like that. But
how many teams did you have?
You're allowed 5. You went to 5 teams.
Hold on. So you had 5 teams and you finished 1st, 2nd, 7th, 13th, and 19th.
Something like that. I mean, I ran them all the same until towards the end. And then I was like, I'll split them up now and try and win it, which was the strategy since I'm playing so many other games. I know people played all 5 differently from the start, and it's a headache.
So 5 the same and then branch. I like that.
Yeah, felt like a better way to do it. And then if I'm not high enough, I just won't branch them out. I'll just coast.
Fan team, you won that?
I was top 10 in the unlimited game last year, and I was top 10 in the free roll on Bet365 the year before that.
Ridiculous. Dream team
top 50 last year, but I was top 10 with about 8 weeks to go. Went for the win and didn't. Dropped off. Doesn't always work. Can't give it a go.
Went for the win. We first had you on and you were about 200th. That was season 4 last in FPL, wasn't
it? Yes. Yeah. So 23, 24.
And you wildcarded in what week?
35.
Late wildcard, 35 at 200th in the world.
Without Haaland.
Gambled, no Haaland. Finished.
He scored a few goals against Wolves, if I remember. Maybe I think it was 4 goals at 195% effective ownership. And I didn't have him.
That's going to sting.
It was fun though. I think I've never had so much excitement of, oh my God, this game is so important. Was good fun. But
from an FPL perspective, you finished about 10k last year.
Yeah, just missed it. 1 point.
Just missed it. 2k the year before.
Mm-hmm.
The year before that?
909th.
I think you're perfectly well equipped to tell us how to do well at these fantasy games, mate, especially FPL.
I haven't won it yet though.
How do you do so well at so many games?
I mean, there's an element of luck. I think I'm gonna caveat that right.
Element of luck against all of these games.
All of them.
Every year.
Every year, all the time. Well, I mean, partly if I play enough games, then one of them should go well. In law of numbers. I'm not doing very well at the Elite Syrian Norwegian game, so we keep that one quiet until I do well. I mean, I've got a bit of a method generally now. I can kind of like I can play with it's not minimal effort because it's max effort across the set, but you can kind of come up with a repeatable method. I use a lot of modeling analytics stuff. So that's projection models, optimization solvers. Obviously for FPL, there's quite a few of those available. But for these other games, then I work with a few friends who will sometimes build them or we build them together, or sometimes I've got to build it myself, or take some other data and adapt it because the rules are quite different. But they are all Premier League related, so I can kind of like hone in on that one league. As long as I can know all the players who's playing week to week, then that's not too much to learn. I've started trying to learn other leagues and finding it a bit trickier, and other sports now as well. I've been playing the Wimbledon fantasy games, but I don't know. Too much free time is probably the issue.
I remember like about I want to say it's like 4 years ago now, but we had Tom Stevenson on the pod, and when Tom agreed to come on, like do you remember, Adam, do you remember we would literally like just look at this guy's history. It was like top 1K, top 1K, top 1K, and he similar was playing other games. He was playing. I remember he was playing like fantasy cycling, and I was like, I didn't even know this world existed.
Love it. Yeah. There's quite a few managers I know do multi-format, or people who play a lot of different leagues will be familiar with Jack Van Plu, who makes models for every fantasy football game he can find. So that's 40 to 50 different leagues. He won, I think, the Romanian and the Croatian league fantasy games last year.
Hilarious.
But again, it's he's got a methodical, repeatable process. So he knows he updates his models. He has a way of getting all the data in all together, and then he's able to kind of just play all these games. And one of them comes off.
The thing with winning though, like the idea as well that like we know you, yeah, and one of the reasons why I think it's very interesting always towards it, other than the fact that you're a delightful young man, is that there is personality in your play, like, and you will adapt your play style effectively to try to win. And a lot of people, when they hear models, they think almost that someone's not playing the game effectively, that they're just like, oh, well, that's just solve and I just choose that and that's what it tells me and that's where I end up. But you can't do that and dial up ways to win, can you? Or can you?
Well, it's another level to it. I think when projection models kind of first started really coming into the FPL space, then you got so much of an edge from actually just being better at predicting the players because you had a robust methodology and you were making fewer errors and you could actually start to weigh things up a bit better. So you can comparing like for like is a bit easier. So like if I compare how many goals Haaland's going to score versus how many goals Isak's going to score, it's not easy and there's lots of variance going into that and whether Isak gets injured throughout the season or whatever, but you can kind of go, okay, like I've got a rough idea of how many goals the striker's going to score for this team compared to this team. And I maybe have a rough idea of how many extra goals a penalty's worth. But once you start comparing how many points worth of goals Haaland gets versus how many assists plus clean sheets worth of goals Trent's getting, then that's much more complicated because one, they're not the same and it's depending on the point scoring. But two, if you're playing other games, then the points are different depending on the game. So Haaland's getting 6 points for a goal in Dream Team and 5 for a goal in Telegraph and 4 for a goal in FPL. And that means it weights differently towards an assist that's 3 points across all the games. So the goals are different, the clean sheets are different. So comparing not like with not like is is trickier. But if you can quantify that, then that becomes a lot easier. So it allows you to weigh things up a lot better. But once more and more people got better at doing those predictions, which is either through more people using these models and talking about the players, but also I think more people are more experienced at the game. People have been playing longer. So it's not just that. But we're also getting access to better market data. I know Rob shares a lot of that stuff, and people are kind of more familiar with these kind of things, and content creation's taken off, and lots of people are talking about, which sorts of players to look at. Then maximizing your chance of winning is not just maximizing your potential points compared to everyone else. If I can get a big gap on how many points I'm expecting, I should win, even if we've got similar teams or something like that. But amongst a set of similarly skilled managers, trying to win is different. It's more game theory. It's more to do with like, well, if they're going to do this, then I can do this one, or I can cover that off, or I can project what they're trying to do more so than just whether this player is good or not. I think the example people use quite often is if it's like the final game week and let's say our teams are 14 out of 15 the same and we're picking one player essentially. If I'm 5 points ahead and I'm picking Salah, and Salah's unquestionably the best player for that game week in this scenario, maybe he's playing, I don't know, a non-league team in the last day of the season for no reason. He's without a doubt the best. There's no doubt about it. Then in order for you to catch me, you have to not pick Salah, even though he's the best player. Because if you pick him, you're not going to catch me. We've got the same team fully. So you have to pick someone worse on projected points. But your chance of winning is increased because there's a chance Salah doesn't play or gets no points or whatever. So if you can start to scale that up to across a full season or across a small period of a season where maybe it's like a wild card towards the end or up to the first wildcard window or anything like that, then you can start to realize how different your relative outcomes are, not just your own individual range of objective outcomes. So once you start to get a feel for playing with that, then that's the fun bit. That's the like try and win rather than try and get as many points as possible.
In all the games that you're playing, I mean, obviously FPL is quite a simplistic game in what makes up the points, right? So in my mind, when you're playing games that involve different avenues to points, those models are going to be slightly more complicated to build. The data sets generally, though, are they similar across the board? Are you because obviously bonus comes into play in FPL, which has a lot of parameters, but obviously is very heavily weighted towards goals and assists and cleans anyway. So are you just ignoring? There's lots of questions here. Are you just almost ignoring that data because it's kind of incidental and one almost equals the other, gets you to that other one? And how many data sets are you using to work across like all these multiple games that you're playing?
So when you say if I'm ignoring things like bonus, do you mean things that are counting a small
towards
amount
bonus? Towards bonus.
So I think FPL is one of the simpler games in that Telegraph, it's like a rolling deadline. So strategically, you can make transfers through the weekend, and that gets a bit complicated. And FPL is a nice kind of, people complain about the deadlines being at whatever time, but it's once a week. And that's actually quite easy. But I would say FPL bonus point scoring is one of the hardest things I've had to try and model, actually relative to other games. Like it's got so many different components. Some of the components are things that you're already getting points for, like goals and assists, which makes it a bit easier in the sense that you're already modeling that, but also harder in the sense that there's this weird like double rewarding of a goal. So people talking about like a return for Cunha was worth 5 or 6 points rather than 3 because he's basically getting bonus if he does that. So bonus is almost a bit like a function of goals and assists. I mean, you get clean sheets as well, but then they tinker with the bonus scoring every year, and we need to ask you guys to read all the rules out to us because I don't understand what's going on. No doubt new changes next season. Who knows? Maybe there's no bonus. Maybe then, whatever. So each year it's a bit different. So I think in games where I'm trying to be like really streamlined with it, then you can kind of assess which ones are the most important bits to get right. So first and foremost, it's who's playing, because you get appearance points in most games, but also if you're playing a lot, you're more likely to be scoring. So two similarly rated strikers, if one's playing and one isn't, then that's just a huge difference. I don't need to worry about their rates of goal scoring while they're on the pitch. So yeah, goals, assists, clean sheets are the most parts. I normally start team first. I think teams is the best kind of way to anchor it to. And then you can make your players kind of sum up to the team ones, and then you're not going to be that far off. And then actually, if you start with the strikers get about this many of the goals and, you know, do it positionally and then go, okay, pens, then you're actually a long way towards going, okay, I've roughly projected how everyone's going to do. If I just run a quick solve or generate some solutions with that, then you can see which players you need to start looking at in more detail to go, oh, maybe I'm slightly over on this guy. Maybe Gordon's taking set pieces now that Trippier's off the pitch and tweaking that. So it's really like focusing your attention on the parts that really make a difference in terms of what you're actually going to do, and trying to ignore the players and teams sometimes that aren't on that kind of edge of what's going to be in your plan.
It's interesting you've mentioned teams there first, because I think if you think about your average Joe manager, whatever, I mean, people will look at analytics and the first thing they'll think of is FPL review, which is obviously just a big list of players, right? So there's very much a player focus on the... Yeah. But it is. The interface is very much like it's all player focused. The whole game is player focused. But it's interesting you spoke initially about team, then about position, and then suddenly it was player. There's a lot of depth to sort of what goes into it, which was quite interesting.
I think, I mean, I don't know how Review's built his model. Obviously, sure. I've been building my own and building similar. But I think under the hood, he's doing something similar. It's just that you can't see it.
Yeah,
but when I build it myself, I know all the component parts and how they all kind of interact and work together. But I think that's the issue some people have with projection models is you see that surface level 4.8 points and you don't really know what it means, and then you try and mentally adjust and go, oh well, I think he's on penalties and I think the model doesn't have him on penalties, but you don't know exactly, or like it shows you some of it, or you're like, oh, I think actually the markets are overrating this team, so I'm going to bring it down a little bit, but actually maybe the model's already done that, or oh, it's not accounting for the fact that this player's out. And it's like, well, if it is, you're now double counting because you're trying to tweak it. So it's really hard to get that full grasp of like, how do I start tweaking things? Because the things that you can edit, and most models you can't actually even edit stuff like this, just here's the data, and that's still useful. And sometimes if you know enough or you're looking at enough different models, you can kind of pick apart and go, oh, I think that they're weighting this a bit more and this a bit less because their Tottenham Hotspur numbers are higher, or this, that, and the other. So as you start to get quite accustomed to them, you can kind of start to reverse engineer the assumptions that the model's making, because that's what models are, just a series of assumptions, and everyone's going to make a slightly different series of assumptions, and that's what results in the output number. So if you're able to do it yourself or understand the underlying like assumptions being made and go, oh, I disagree with that one or I agree with that one, then you can kind of get a clearer picture. So I think the people who say the models are just telling you what to do are the ones who are kind of saying like someone's made a lot of assumptions and you're just taking them all at face value, which some people do. And that's like, I think for the most part, the people who are playing like that, they're not trying to claim that they're like some genius that, you know, they've gone, well, basically I've copied what this guy's come up with, and FPL Review's a very smart guy. He's made some good assumptions, but people personally will have their own opinions. So most of the top analytics managers are making these reviewing whether they think that's right or wrong, or whether they can edit it or move it back and forth, or generate a series of solutions and go, what's the difference here? And maybe it's like, oh, it kind of comes down to whether I rate Arsenal's attack at the minute or not. I'll look into Arsenal's attack and see whether I think the numbers should be a bit higher or not, or whether I think, okay, they're missing Saka. I think they've come down a bit, but I'd actually bring them down a lot more. They really struggle without him. This kind of thing. So there's all this taking the numbers and evaluating them and understanding the assumptions that got them there and whether you agree with them. And I would say that people who don't do that are, being a bit lazy, and maybe but then they can play how they want to. I don't really, I have no issue with it. But those are the people that analytics skeptics are having a go at, in my opinion. But they point it at the people who aren't
do anything.
Yeah.
You,
it's almost like we're both having an argument about
who's this guy?
a different group, but talking to the wrong group about it.
Yeah.
And that's where you get all these cycles of no, you're wrong, etc.
I think if there's a load of people that played FPL for a long, long time, and play in a certain way. They kind of know themselves, maybe potentially as people. They kind of know how they play, and they might be playing currently, without analytics. And if they were starting to sort of integrate those type of things, the bits that they enjoy watching lots of football. They enjoy, reading articles, taking lots from it. Me and Adam like to, analyze haircuts and all those type of things, which are really important to decisions. I can play a lot of that through to what you're saying there. Is having an understanding of what models are saying is important, and we do that in many different ways. Whether you do it from a solver type review type world, or there's loads of them now, isn't there? Hub do their stuff, and you've got Top Fam, you've got Scout do theirs. FPL
might be a new one on the way soon.
There's one coming. What's it called?
Solio Analytics. I'll plug it, or the team will tell me off for coming on and not talking about it. We're launching our own site as well.
How much can you plug it? How much can you plug Solio to us?
Well, how long have we got? I'll talk free. Yeah, I mean,
it's super secret. It's super secret.
Is it? Well, you come join the beta test. You guys are coming in. The launch will be soon. The season's coming soon. It's only 5 weeks till the season starts. We need to get it out soon. So, yes, no panic stations for us. But yeah, we'll have our own tool out.
There's tools out there, basically. Yes, and what you're effectively saying to us is, if you were looking to get into those worlds without necessarily losing all the stuff that you've really enjoyed about this game, well, that's your bit. Look at it, say, this really favors this defense, this really favors this attack. I can name, I want to say 3 seasons ago, maybe 4 seasons ago, there was a point where I was about 600th at the time in game week 28, and I wildcarded, and I looked at everywhere I could look at and stuff, and review massively favoured Villa and Wolves defence. Wolves had a double game week. Villa had a double game week. They very much didn't like Philip Coutinho because his minutes were shit. On those ones, and was some time ago. And I tripled up on Wolves, Roman Saiss, Kilman, and Jimenez. Still remember that. I remember them playing in double game week, and I think between the 3 of them in that double game week, they got something like 4 points between the 3 of them, despite all of them playing 90 minutes.
In a double?
All of them played 90 minutes.
Oh, dear.
They literally all got booked in both games and conceded in both games and didn't score in all those games. It was truly phenomenal. The second game of the game week, I remember that double game week, they played Arsenal, and I had 6 players in that game, and the 6 players between them got 8 points. I remember that. Very.
You got to laugh at that, really.
And then I was I've gone with this, and it's there.
Now what?
But I was just drunk on the model. I was like, I was almost feared as well. I've never been in that position. But I didn't trust Wolves. Like, definitely didn't trust Wolves. I definitely didn't trust Villa back in those days. But I was like, maybe it's right. And that's where I think, I wouldn't have done that now. I definitely wouldn't do that now. I wish I was if I was 600th now and had the ability to make those decisions, then I think I would do a lot better decision than I made then at the time, looking at it, just choosing it. was something that I definitely regret. So I think for anyone that's not analytic, we do consume it. You will consume it now, even if you're consuming it third hand through content creators that you're watching who are all looking at those things. You're hearing stuff that is some model based opinions. Even just the single game things that we'll show with Rob T. It's a version of analytics. Do you know what I mean? Like this game.
The bookmakers aren't just plucking numbers out of thin air. Like,
No.
Where do you think those guys are getting the numbers from?
And what's really interesting is I think sometimes because it's not almost currently built into the game, the analytics into the actual FPL interface, as it were. I say currently because I've got this co-pilot agreement, whether it is, and we'll have some kind of AI assistant manager at some point. But because it's not, I think that almost creates that divide a little bit more from it. Whereas I play a lot of NFL fantasy, and NFL fantasy has analytic built in it in terms of it'll have rest of season, it will have projected next few games. You'll be able to see and flick through for all your players. It'll be in there, and some of the stuff that you're
NFL, you literally, if you've got a matchup against someone during the week before the game starts, you've got projected score matchups. They just exist.
Exactly.
Like, it's going to be 104.5 versus 97.7, and you're like, well, why is that? And it's just there.
And you will have bench decisions, but you will constantly be checking yourself versus the model here clearly favors this matchup, but I actually know this not as good a matchup as it seems, and this and what I know, and I'm monitoring all this stuff for it. It's all fine. Like, that's what you do. Like, that's the benefit of doing it. It doesn't make me watch it less. I watch it more. Like, I miss very little NFL every week, like that it goes on. It doesn't. I don't think being involved in the analytical world takes away any enjoyment from football viewing, football interests, or what.
Do you think that's a pinch point though, really? Because I think that's what people fear. I think that's what people fear, is that, because I've said this before on podcasts and to other people. And you can see it in the grounds, obviously, when you're there. Like, football is one of the most emotive sports that we've got, right? It's high octane, it's full action, it's end to end. Because there's no stoppages, it is non-stop. Sometimes it can be slower, sometimes it's quick, and you get goals in the first minute, goals in the last minute. You just get every range of emotion. And I think as football fans that want to sort of say, well, I'm a fan of football, I enjoy all this stuff, and then now I want to play fantasy football because I think I know what I'm talking about, they feel, I mean, maybe I feel like this a little bit, but I feel like my knowledge of the game is good enough to do well at these games. I think the reality is actually the processes that I'm trying to put through my brain is exactly the same stuff as happening on the models anyway, and yet I just can't compute it. And there's a reason nobody does 300 times 473 squared and take the square root of pi and then fucking multiply them, because you can't do it in your head, right? That's why we have calculators. They exist. And no one's saying I'm
going with that.
Yeah. No one's saying I'm stupid because I can't do that calculation, right? We have calculators because they do that stuff for us, right?
Yeah, it's kind of just automating a lot of it. So, like, you lose some of that human touch on, okay, like, as I start to tweak things. But if you want to do it at scale, then you're kind of just going, okay, I'll automate it. And what I do a lot with the solvers is kind of like, I'll have an idea of something I want to test. So maybe I'm picking my game week 1 squad and I'm trying to pick Salah or Haaland, and I'm trying to test whether I think both of them together or which one works. And so I'll run some simulations and see if I pick Salah and he gets injured, how easy is it to get to Haaland? Does the solver kind of let it do that? Or vice versa? Or if I have both, what lets me kind of move around? And I can do that manually. I can kind of work it through and work through each path one by one. But if I wanted to go, okay, I want to see what happens at scale or over 10,000 simulations, then like that's giving me really useful data. And it's not like it's telling me an answer. It's going to tell me, all right, well, if we injure Salah 50%, well, if Salah gets injured, we injure Salah. If Salah gets injured 50% of the time in the first 4 weeks, then this is the kind of thing you can do, but it only lets you swap to Saka and Haaland if you don't have Trent, because then you've got the budget and then you see all the pieces fit together. So some of the strategy stuff is doing it at scale with the simulations, and some of the projection stuff is doing it at scale because you're doing all these different players. And for me, that's really enjoyable. I find that process really fun. And for some people, that isn't fun. They want to think it through, or the enjoyment they get from FPL is more to do with staking their opinion on teams and seeing how that pans out and going, like, I back this team, I'm going to get more of them. And if it comes off, you feel great. Yeah, I backed Arsenal and they did well. But to me, I play it more as I'm trying to pick some players and do something interesting. And then when I watch the games, I happen to have a set of players that I'm slightly cheering on, or I have an interest in this random game because I want this team to do well, or this, that, the other. And I find the enjoyment, I find it enhances my football experience by having a set of players to cheer on. So I've really enjoyed the Wimbledon matches this year because in most matches, I've got some kind of leverage on either side. So I'm supporting this player against this player, and I don't know who either of them are a week ago. But that's interesting. That's fun. But if you want to go, okay, I want to stake not my reputation, but my opinion on this player or this team and have that come good or come bad in FPL, that's a very different process. So you're playing it differently. So first and foremost, FPL is designed to be a marketing tool for the Premier League for us to enjoy the games more. So if it's not doing that, then you're not playing it right. But if it is doing that, I think you're playing it right, however you want to do that. If you want to go, I want to push for the very top. I want to, at all costs, almost at the cost of my enjoyment, try and get as high a rank as possible, then you've got to play a bit differently. And I think people need to be honest with their balance of enjoyment with pushing for the high rank. And actually, those are quite different things, especially when you get there's other games or not. There's mini leagues, there's FPL Challenge, there's draft modes. That's where people tended to put most of their focus before. And now we put more and more focus on the overall rank. And the overall rank is harder and harder to actually do consistently because there's 11 million players. So someone who doesn't know who any of the players are will beat you because there's enough of them that one of them will just get the right picks.
Are we talking about Susan again?
No. Susan is the greatest manager of all time. I've nothing but respect for Susan. But yeah, I mean, there's people up there who just don't know what they're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a fact you should accept, is that bad managers will beat you because there's 11 million people or more. It depends how big we get. So that's not something you can really control.
Shall we? Is this a segue for us to look at how we are as managers?
Yeah.
What
we've spoken so long. We've spoken so long there. My mouse has frozen. That's how long we've been chatting about that. But we can move on. So we've got a few things to walk through. Before we do that, again, this is probably the first piece. Well, it's now the second piece, I guess, of content that we're putting out this season. We'll be back once the game launches, price reveals, and all that will be happening. We'll start talking about that. We're hoping to get John McKenzie back on, Ted Knutson, if we can speak to him. That would be great. And anybody else that we can get on in the pre-season that gives us a bit of fantasy and a bit of football flavour to it. So we have that balance. That is going to be good. And if you want to see more of that, make sure you drop a subscribe on the channel, follow. Let us know in the comments what your how you feel your play style is now. And whether like the last 20 minutes we've been chatting already, sort of sits with you and how that kind of works with you.
And send Adam your game week 1 drafts. Tag
please.
Adam and show him your draft that you've got with all your fake prices.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That'd be great. If you want to join us over on Patreon, you can do patreon.com/Above Average FPL. We do have the option now to support us annually as well for a quarter off, 25% off or something like that. You can come and join us in the Discord. We'll have the cash leagues and all the individual games going on throughout the season. Alternatively, you can be a free member. There'll be content on there as well. So again, patreon.com/Above Above Average FPL. And then on to Playstyles. So what I get from this, and you can explain it to me, is the good managers are on bottom left-hand corner and the bad manager is in the top right-hand corner. That's how...
No, we're all bad managers. That's what I was trying to point out.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I think I just wanted something to talk about. Well, we were talking before this about what sort of things we were going to talk about in the pod, and we were talking about playing. Well, Dilksy put a tweet out about how he finds it. What was he saying? He finds it easier to play loose, especially in poker as well. He's been sort of semi-professional poker player. I do a lot of daily fantasy stuff with him as well. And I think we've both said this, is that we personally find it easier to play loose than tight. But if you want to be really good at the top level, you need to be able to play both whenever they come up. So this was just, I can describe it for the podcast listeners. It's a sort of two-way chart of tight versus loose and aggressive versus patient. I've put Baker as tight and aggressive, Adam as loose and aggressive, and myself loose and patient. And tight and patient are the good managers. So Harry, Praz, all these guys, Ben Crellin. Sort of mocking. I think like the very best managers are the ones who can play all four. But you start to learn your own zone in this. It's quite similar to those personality tests that I think you were talking about sometime. But as you're getting started in FPL, I think it's kind of learning which of these. I mean, it's a bit sort of reductive to say that there are only four categories and it's, you're in one of them. But you can kind of learn, okay, do I prefer to play like this? Is this kind of how I play? And if you learn how to operate within that space to the best of your ability, then you're going to be a better manager. But also, if you know that that's how you want to play and you learn ways of playing that way rather than, like I thought I should actually pick this guy, but I didn't really want to, and then I did, and then he did badly. It's like, well, actually, you're not enjoying it. Even if it comes off, you're like, I'd rather have picked this one and see how it came off. So you can get more enjoyment out of the game by playing and picking players that suit the way you want to play. And I think this is roughly what I was trying to get at with this silly graphic. But
I think that,
what do you guys think?
No, that makes sense. I mean, one thing Baker will tell, but Baker's said many, many times, is that despite the fact that we do a team selection and talk through stuff on a Thursday, the first time he actually realizes what my team is after the deadline. Because I do go through that process in my mind, and I tend to do it in my mind in the last hour before the deadline. Is I tend to have 3 or 4 different options in my mind, and then I kind of just pick one. Sometimes a rogue thought will come in there, and I'll go, why don't I get Jeremy Doku for fun? And that sort of thing can creep in.
Rogue equals loose.
Yeah, rogue equals. Yeah, I think. Well, I think you need to move this a bit further to the right for me, because I get super loose sometimes on those. Far. Yeah, sometimes it goes too far and I end up with stupid decisions like who did I have this season? Last season we were talking about, like Mateus Nunes came in. Who did I bring in like game week 7?
Remember,
you did have Mateus Nunes.
Who did I bring in game week 7? Was it like Dwight McNeil or something? Or was it worse than that?
Yeah, you sold Salah for McNeil.
Sold Salah for McNeil.
Yeah, there you go.
Great move.
Yeah,
I'd do it again.
Yeah, exactly. The Doku thing was just redemption searching, but that didn't really work. But yeah, no, I mean, it suits it. It does show how I play, and it makes sense in my mind. And at the same time, I'm okay with it. I also kind of would like to have a higher rank, so I'm kind of torn in between the two.
Is there anything on there though that is we think about ranks? Like I've said for many years in this pod is that kind of the way I play, in that it is relatively tight but aggressive, and some of that aggression, some of that is like quite defensive aggression is what I would call it. Like I'll take more hits than most people, but a lot of the times that's to play tighter, and that's what that like, so I can't be hurt that bad. Like, but it also will always limit me, which is why probably if I go through last 5-6 seasons, like 3 of them are in 20 odd K, one of them's like 30K, 150K, and one's like 120K. So they're all tight. They're there, but the ability to win FPL, or the ability to even have a stellar season is limited sometimes by not being in that good manager space enough.
You can still do very well in these other categories, and I think like there are
But
aggressive loose managers and aggressive tight managers who do very well, and actually it's kind of like what you're expecting on a season to season. So I'd say Adam's probably more likely to spike a top 1k finish of the two of you,
Yes.
but is also more likely to have a 1 million rank. But that might be what you want. You might be like, okay, I want to just see if I can get a 3-digit rank at some point in the next 5 years. But if you don't, you want to go, okay, well, maybe it'll just come good. There were plenty of managers in the top 1k who played pretty tight, played pretty safe, didn't do too many, risky different players. They had, quote, the template team, which I think as a concept is a bit odd. Like there's no one template team. But you do always end up sitting somewhere on here. So what was the Thomas Frank quote you said? If you don't take any risks, you're taking risks.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I liked
which I think is really. I think you're choosing where you're sitting on this. You're not choosing risk or no risk, or aggression or no aggression. If you fail to take risks, that is itself a risk. And I think this is one of the concepts that I was talking with James Fantasy Football Trout, who's on the Solio team. He sort of coined the term as like, you own everyone in the game, just some of them you own like negatively. So your effective ownership relative to everyone else, if you own Salah, but everyone owns Salah apart from like 5% of people, you only own 5% of Salah relative to everyone else. You don't own very much Salah. But if you own a player that no one else has, you've got like 100% of their points. But if you don't own Salah and almost everyone has him, then you own Salah 95% negatively. I don't know if that quite makes sense. But like by choosing a player, you're also choosing not to have a different player.
an opponent.
It's not like you have these 15 players and that's it. By choosing those 15, you've not chosen, well, I mean, 600 odd other players, but maybe another 40 or 50 of importance in terms of other people in them. So you're picking somewhere on this graph. You're not sort of saying, I'll have this guy or I won't. It's how much will I own him? And some of that you can't control. Like you can control who's in your team, but you can't control who's in everyone else's team. So if I own Salah for 5 weeks and no one owns him, and then people start buying him, my ownership of Salah has decreased, but I haven't done anything. But then maybe everyone gets him and I see an opportunity. I go, oh, if I sell him, I'll have lots of not Salah against the field, and you can go that way. So I think that's quite a nice way of looking at this sort of risk taking. Is there's risks in terms of that relative ownership to the field. I think that's what I kind of meant by tight and loose, is how, because you can dampen all those effects. If you have a lot of players that are well owned, then the maximum ownership that anyone has, positive or negative, is much lower. So your potential to go really high or really low is decreased. But equally, if you go the other way, you can play really loose and have lots of lowly owned players in your team and not own lots of highly owned players. You still might just score the same number of points as someone else who's picked
100%.
all those players. So you're just more likely to get loads more and more likely to get loads less. But actually, on the whole, probably just end up somewhere similar over a season.
Yeah. I think there's definite things. I think understanding your play style is definitely is important. I think there are bits that I can look at where I'm like, what would it take for me to be so when I look at this and I'm like, which way would I want to go? Like you say, I'd like to go all of the ways, but there's a bit in my brain that says I should be a little bit more patient. And I think there's a lot in my who would I select, because I think I will often choose players that then push me into a corner that in order to be tight, I've got to then be aggressive.
Yeah, whereas I think in the same situation, I would see that as a nice opportunity to roll a few transfers, have my team become quite different from everyone else's, and then be in a position to do something with 3 or 4 transfers in a few weeks. And as long as I feel my team's good, I'll quite happily go that way. But that's 2 different ways to react to the same path, and neither's necessarily better.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
and it's
I'm a good
depends what you
scrambler.
want.
Like that's the bit I know to myself is that I'm good at scrambling. Like that is something that I've managed to make work. But and I'm fearful of not scrambling. I think
Mm.
definitely is that part where it's like, shit, what happens if I don't? What happens? And
What if I
then,
rolled a transfer?
yeah,
What if?
yeah.
Do you think about
Should
that much?
should we show how little I roll transfers?
Well, I was just going to show the ideal, like where we're looking to try and get to, because obviously you put this together, Johnny. This is where we want to be, really.
Oh,
This
yes.
is
Forgot
the
this.
play style.
Yes.
So for anybody
This is
listening,
what
in fact, and the people who are listening on the podcast, I'm not even going to tell you about this visual. You have to come over to the YouTube and see it.
It's indescribable. I couldn't say it in words.
this is how Johnny told me that I've got to start playing.
Yeah.
That's how you're already playing. What was it? It was the Haaland to Salah switch in 11 or 10.
I mean, that was mine.
That a lot of people did. And you
Yeah,
just
yeah.
went, oh, I don't have the resources to do that. I'll just do a hit. I'll do that. Whereas Adam was like, oh, I don't have the resources to do that. Well, Haaland's pretty good. I'll stick with that. And other people had, I don't know. I think I saved up to 2 or 3, but it's not like it was definitely the right thing to do either.
No,
Just-
it was
paid
it was
off,
a very it was a very enjoyable outcome.
But yes, this is.
So yeah, welcome to
Baker's-
Baker's transfers available by game week.
I
Look at your
enjoyed
face.
this one. I enjoyed making this graph.
What did you think when you saw this one?
I mean, I kind of knew that this is what you'd done already once I'd scraped the data. But sorry, ethically sourced the data. But yeah, once I'd built the plot and then started putting all these other different ones on it, and I had all these different lines for all the different groups, and then I was like, oh, actually, I'll individually just see what Baker's and Adams look like, and I plotted it, and it just sort of filled half the chart, and I was like, oh, right, okay. I knew you didn't roll very much, but I didn't realize it was literally, like 4 times. You had, yeah, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there's 7 weeks out of 37, because you got unlimited transfers game week 1, that you had 2 transfers, and other than that, you always had 1.
And 2 of those were after wildcards.
Yeah, so you don't like having 2. You've got 1, and you go. Oh, you were saying as well. Often, if you get to 2, you'll then use 3 with a hit.
Yes.
You panic. You're like, oh my god, there's so many options.
Yeah.
Is it almost a
definitely.
case of like, I don't want to give myself those many options, so I'll just
Yeah.
do 1?
So for audio people, basically is what this is showing us is a graph of how many transfers I had available throughout the season, and they changed the game parameters last season that you instead of having a maximum of 2, you can have up to a maximum of 5. I never changed
You
those rules.
forgot,
I I stayed on the previous model, and never had more than 2. So I am still yet to experience 3 transfers or 4 transfers. Maybe I never will. What if they get rid of it? I
Maybe.
never
Oh, just take it
never
away now.
enjoyed those days.
Although if they say you can't roll transfers anymore, then you're well set.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm in.
dream.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to tinker. I'm the Ranieri
Yeah.
of so whether the podcast and doing team selections make that as well, you start getting sucked in, seeing it. There's definitely that part of fear of missing out. Definitely with transfers where
Did you notice this through the season? Did you feel like, because I knew you knew I haven't got to 3
yeah, I
yet,
consciously was
but,
doing it. Yeah, I made
yeah.
it. I think I said it on the pod that I'm just not going to bother to ever get above 2. I'm not even going to try to. But yeah, I rarely feel like I have a very good strategy when I get to 2. Like when I get to 2, I'm like, oh, I could do this, but I could do this, I could do this. Is you start taking. I suddenly find myself with like 12 different pictures on my phone of different things that I think I can do. Yeah.
Got to stop yourself wasting too much time, too much fun.
And
all
maybe
those options,
that's,
but
on a reflection piece, that's maybe because I'm just on straight away looking at that game week. And maybe, like you say, is where you're trying to think about those paths longer term of actually, look, if you have those, where does it go wrong? What is if that person gets injured, where do I, maybe that's where it's a case of, let's
because I think
more.
there's a few managers who certainly spoke about this in terms of like the ideal was to get to 3 or 4 and then play like this. to some extent of like using one or two a week, but hovering around 3 or 4, so that if something goes wrong, you've got 3 or 4, or if there's a place to attack with some doubles or blanks, then you've got them there, rather than getting to those points and being like, I've got to take a -8 or have a worse team or whatever.
7 hits.
7 hits. Yeah, but I think I took a few. I can't remember.
I
might
took
even have
15.
taken a -16 at some point.
You took 15 hits.
15 hits, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. You're playing. Tight. There you go. But yeah, having 3 transfers or 4 transfers, more often than not, means I should use 1 or 2 and hold them. So I think if I were trying to reframe this problem, it would be a case of like finding a few spots within the season. I think we'll see this when the other graphs come up. Finding a few spots where in the season where you think, okay, it would be useful to have, whether I use them or not, it will be useful to be at that game week with 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And aiming to get to there. And in the meantime, using the 1s and 2s around that. And then once you're there, you go, okay, well, I've got there early. I can use 1s and 2s as normal and pretend I don't have any spare until there's a rainy day or an opportunity to attack. And I think
don't we know these? We know these weeks already. Like you can take the least risk on your team in the first few weeks because that's when nothing happens. Like there's an international break comes up and Europe starts, but that's kind of just incidental to the carnage that happens post game week 20 when Europe and these cups and these injuries and international breaks all then impact the number of game weeks, a number of fixtures, actually, I should say, we have.
Yeah. I mean, you talked about rolling to quite a few at the start. Should we go to your chart?
We can go to me. Yeah, I just said...
Got straight up to 4. Look at that. Amazing.
Well, I say, because I wildcarded in game week 3. So I triple captained Haaland in game week 2 and was in the top 10k and went, I'm not really sure about my team. I think this is going to be a better team to work with. And it was fine for a few weeks, and then I just made a bunch of changes in game week 6. And I had a look because you said I think pre-pod you were saying that I might have hit my way out of these 4 transfers. I didn't. I actually took 3 transfers in game week 7 and then 2 in game week 8. So
because you dropped from 4 to 2. You don't.
So I took 3. Yeah, I took 3 and then 2 to basically like clear out my bank of transfers. And then I just went hell for fucking leather on hits by the looks of it. Because, all these game weeks, 19, 20, 21, 26, 27, these are all weeks I probably hit in. I think I took -8s in like 34, 35, or maybe there was a free hit maybe there somewhere. Yeah, but I just went a bit nuts.
I think this was the power of the early wildcard. We'll touch on this in a bit later, but one of the things that made the early wildcard so good was, one, there was a few things you can switch up. So you can get onto Palmer and you can get off Haaland and you can get Salah, and the Haaland to Salah switch and back was a bit tricky to do with transfers. But you can do that, fix the rest of your team, transfer window's closed, and Bomo's suddenly on penalties and nailed. Eze's not moved to Man City, Kwanzaa's not playing, and Kunku's not playing. You can fix all of those problems and keep a hold of your 2 or 3 transfers you have at that point. So then you can then roll after your wild card, and suddenly you're at 4 or 5 in game week 6 or 7. And I think I didn't play wildcard 3 in the end, but I was quite close to. I used both my transfers to move off. Who did I have? Nkunku and Mavididi, who I'd started with, who suddenly Jamie Vardy was not as injured as Steve Cooper had said he was. But I used those 2, but I could have used the wildcard, saved the 2 transfers, and then set the team up for game week 5 or 6, and then used those to do the 6 to 7 switch. So I think that's a benefit of the early wildcard that we didn't used to have, because you can, 1, roll up to 5, but 2, you can roll through the wildcard. So if you have 2 or 3 transfers in your wildcard, you then have 2 or 3 afterwards. So that, I think that was, you can see that here. The strength of that early wildcard was that point of getting to 4. I can't remember exactly who was in your wildcard team, but I think I was looking at some of the other people in some of the other good manager sets who played a wildcard around that time. And I think they had a different Salah Haaland structure. I can't remember, but I think you ended up getting to game week 6 or 7 with a need to use all these 4 transfers, which meant that in game week 9 and 10, when other people were doing switches, you'd kind of used them in 6 and 7. And sometimes that can't be helped. Sometimes you wildcard into 3 players who get injured. And you're like, oh, well, sod it. That didn't work. So sometimes that's what they're for, is for that rainy day. But I think for the most part, you've got... So if we've got a wild card, 2 wild cards...
Oh, wild card in game week 4, yeah, sorry. I wild card
game week 4, yeah.
Yeah.
So you've only got, apart from hits, like 34 transfers to use in the season, because there's none in game week 1, and you've got a wild card, 2 wild cards, and a free hit.
Well, Adam had 50 because he did 15 hits.
Yeah, so you can buy more, but you've got 30 to 40 transfers. So if you think, okay, that's how many I'm going to use, then do I want to try and use 3 or 4 or 5 over a 2-week period to change the team, or do I want to have them more for later? So for those other splits, or to get in a strong position and just hold it, so that when we get to game week 10, 12, there's a switch, or there's something interesting, or the January transfer. We've got AFCON this coming season, all sorts. Like there's quite a few obvious spots to go. It'd be pretty useful to have a few transfers there. And that's arguably going to be more impactful use of my transfer than this upgrade this week. It's almost like putting up with, okay, I'll bring my bench player on. It doesn't look great, but I think we tend to overvalue the improvement this week over the potential use of it.
That's a
later,
huge thing for me.
which
That's
is
definitely
tricky.
I see Andy Martin talk about it a lot. Yeah, I see Andy Martin talk about it a lot. In his wonderful passive aggressive way that he does. But it's I do tend to have a focus on the game week ahead of me and trying to maximize what I can get out of the game week ahead of me, because I almost kind of in my mind I'd like that little dopamine hit of positivity, right? So I'd rather try and take a hit to get Eze, who might get an assist, rather than play Harwood Bellis, who might get a sub appearance. Even though the likelihood of Eze actually getting an assist, is obviously, it's more likely that he's going to blank than do anything else, right? So he's more likely to get 2 or 3. And is that hit then, the hit's then not worth it? So, but my mind just goes, but what if it's 9? What if it's 10? What if it's 12, right?
But it's so much more often than we think. And I think I try and, I don't know if this is how I think normally or if I've tried to rephrase it, but imagine the dopamine hit from Harwood Bellis getting a goal or an assist. Like, it's rarer. It's much rarer than Eze scoring. But if you go, I rolled my transfer, I played Harwood Bellis, and Southampton kept a clean sheet against Man City, that's a bit of a dopamine hit.
It's fireballs, mate.
It's much less. It's less exciting. I will agree. I think like hitting these players in and having this player that you want, and having to say, no, I'm going to save this for later is, it's a skill. It's hard. Yeah.
I had Leif Davis on my bench for basically to play him in game week. I think it was 10 or 11 specifically. And then I didn't, because I made transfers in that week, I didn't play him, and he scored like 10 points.
Yeah.
Like
I remember the Leif Davis 10-pointer. Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one that sticks.
So I think maybe there's a case of like, okay, is my team good enough on any given week? And is the upgrade big enough? And maybe if we can like widen those bars a little bit. So the necessity to make a transfer is the upgrade's got to be pretty big, because the ones that we want tend to fall into this category of, and it is frustrating when you're like, I was going to buy this player and then they scored.
Of course. It's
obviously, that's annoying. But I think from a process point of view, you're going to get into better positions, because then suddenly you get the dopamine hit later of like, some guys are stuck with one transfer and these 2 important players have got injured, and I can make an easy switch and I can attack and I can go wherever I want. Is like having this value of being in a powerful position rather than having a powerful team all the time. Because like we're going to have bad teams most weeks. You can't have a good team every week.
We like to,
unless you're really lucky.
We like to rib our friend Harry about being quite lucky, because he is quite lucky.
Yeah.
But I often just incredibly admire the the number of times people will say he's got lucky because he didn't make a move and then he just happens to have that guy and that guy does get that 10, 15 points up. And I'm like, right, having the patience, the resilience to not have that optimal team, not only through like making content throughout the week, but during that deadline stream, which if you go look at those deadline streams and you just see the chat just like
I was gonna say,
critiquing
especially as a content
thousands of
creator,
people doing it, and he's literally, we love watching Harry sweat over his team, but looking through it and managing to get through that deadline and having not done it, it's like you have to have had that process in your brain beforehand that this transfer is not worth it. That this is good. This is good life skills for us, mate. I feel like we're being coached.
Oh, good.
It's wonderful.
I'm enjoying this.
Well, I hope it works.
Come on then,
You can come and blame me
master.
if. This is me. I don't know if I played that well, but I do have a few more transfers available. So I played a wildcard in game week 8, I think. So as I said, I rolled in game week 2 to have then 2 in 3, and then I used them both to fix my 2 issues. And then in game week 5 I rolled. In game week 6 I did the Salah Haaland switch, or whichever way around it was, I can't remember. And then wildcarded to do the Haaland Salah switch back. Rolled in 9. I think rolling in 9 was actually something that I was quite pleased with in terms of my process, because I'd wildcarded Son in and he got injured. And I knew that the plan was to get him over to Parma in about game week 12, but also to get Haaland to Salah in 10, most likely, because that was the switch that I thought a lot of people were going to do, or a lot of good managers especially were going to do. And I thought, actually, that's something that I want to do structurally, but also I back Salah from that point of view. So I benched Son in game week 9 because I didn't have a nice route to Parma. Well, I think I did, but I had 2 transfers, and it would have required doing something like swapping Raya down to Areola or something. And I was like, that's not 2 transfers worth, because 1 is 2 transfers to get Palmer when I can actually get him in 12, and 2, it puts me in a spot where I probably can't swap Haaland to Salah in 10. So I rolled with Son, did Haaland to Salah.
Is that the week where
10.
you did you benched Son and played like Lewis Dunk?
Oh, well, I mean, I played someone.
There was
terrible.
someone.
Yeah.
There was
it was
someone
Lewis
terrible
Dunk,
that
or it was
played.
Anderson, or someone, or I played one of my terrible. I might even played Leif Davis a week early against a terrible team.
I remember seeing at the time being like,
you might be thinking of Jan. Jan benched Son for Charlie Taylor, and got a lot of stick pre-deadline or post-deadline.
I remember that.
Of like, what are you doing? So he's playing City, which is a hard game, but was just Son. And I think Taylor played first and scored. And Jan just went and retweeted all these comments saying why are you playing Charlie Taylor? Who's this guy? What are you on about? And it was great. I think Son then went on and scored, but then got an own goal as well. And actually, it didn't really matter too much. But
that was it. He did.
Charlie Taylor scoring. Well, that's the dopamine hit I was talking about. Charlie Taylor scoring when you bench Son.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, and he just, the way he casually went and retweeted everything. I remember talking to him about it. Was funny. But so Son got injured, wasn't going to play, but might be back soon. And I had some defenders to play because I just wildcarded. So I was like, okay, no, I value this switch in 10 more. I'm going to roll, get to 3, then switch, and then still got some transfers left to get to Palmer and some of the Arsenal guys in 12. And in the end, Son did play in game week 11. I think I got rid of him soon afterwards, but I kind of weathered the storm a little bit, and was quite pleased with that period of play, even if maybe I should have wildcarded into a better team. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then 12 to 18, I think I probably should have rolled them a little bit more this period in 18, 19, 20. Quite a few people had transfers, and I had to roll from 16 to 19 to get up there. And then there's this big peak in game week 24, which was when the doubles were coming. So we had the double in game week 24 and the double in game week 25, but we didn't know what the game week 25 double was until the cup semis between 24 and 25. And then I just used all the transfers on that, rolled a bit for 29, used them on that, and then I saved my free hit, so I rolled up to 34, and then used loads of transfers in 34, and then used a free hit in 37, I think. But it's kind of like these, at least I'm practicing what I'm preaching to some extent. There's these periods of, I think this is going to be a useful time to switch my team. And unless I've got a really pressing issue, trying to get to that point with the transfers, and
I've got a question.
putting up with Lewis Dunk.
Would you ever make a move that could be classed as like a semi-bluff? Let me explain.
Bluff.
Let me explain.
Okay.
Is because one of the things that went badly for me last season was that period, sort of game week 20 to 30 was not a good position. I had an incredible run. A terrible start of the season, like 3.5 million after game week 9. Got to like top 100k by like game week 20 with an incredible run, but didn't get any further in that period of time where I played. The assistant manager came out, and I think triple captain was in that period. No, triple captain I played later.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed in this, and we'll look at in a minute the other managers that did well and in those good positions, is there was some stacking up of transfers prior to that, sort of like game week 24 when we didn't quite know the doubles. What I did was I made a few gambles on getting on a few players that had decent fixtures that could double.
Right.
So I then was like, hey, if this pays off, I've got the good fixture now, and then I might get the double. So I did like Kulusevski because he was home Leicester, and then he might
I remember
have
you
got a
asking
double.
about it. Yeah.
And for example, and I did it, I think there was a couple more I did and it's this thing that I've done a few times, and I cannot remember it ever working. And in this case, like, so I ended up, we know I didn't have 3 transfers or 4 transfers going into that period of time, which then meant what I was doing when I had to play that assistant manager, I was scrambling, I was hitting every week because I was trying to make like assistant manager moves plus also make moves in my team, and I had a couple of injuries and the doubles were flying in, and trying to play that aggressive to be tight way of having a team that I like really good. And then I feel like, in my mental anguish was like, I've not really got the goodness out of this. So now I've got to try and win. So what I'm going to do here is go for Ruud van Nistelrooy my last week assistant manager to try and push for it. And also that didn't win, but Glasner did. And then I've completely fucked myself really in that sort of 5-6 game week period. And now I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh yeah, everyone else was stacking up on transfers and I wasn't. And the bluff.
The bluff. I thought you meant like, do I make a transfer so that my friends think I'm doing a certain path and then I'm going another way? Like,
no, it's like I was like, guessing.
Wow, I was sort of like, what's he doing? And then it go the other way.
Yeah, it did look a bit like that. People would be like, what are you doing? Why have you gone Kulusevski? What on earth are you thinking?
Yeah, I like doing that.
I've worked it out.
Like,
they might.
What's he doing? And then they work it out, and they're like, it is an okay move, rather than continually thinking, what on earth is that? I didn't mind the Kulusevski move. I remember I
then got stuck with Kulusevski though.
Yeah. And I think that's the bit to like kind of evaluate is maybe like, did I need to sell the player I was selling? I can't remember who you sold for him, but like if I had not enough midfielders and
he might be going to Man United. He might be going to Man United. He might be going to Man United. The guy I sold. He's never been any. Okay. He's never been any good in FPL.
I think I owned him something like that almost every week.
Mode Kulusevski is what I did.
Yeah. So you're kind of swapping there rather than upgrading, and it might be an upgrade in the short term. There's a couple of weeks with the potential of it being a bigger upgrade that Spurs get that double in 25. But I think I'd see that more as like, okay, do I need to buy a midfielder now? I've 3 injuries, need to sell a mid. Kulusevski would be a great option to bring in as a replacement because he has that potential big upside of like getting an extra fixture rather than he might score an extra goal compared to the other guy, because also that can just go the other way. Whereas they're probably not going to lose a fixture. So I'd see the upside there of kind of like, okay, I can go early. But I think, I'd quite rarely feel the need to go early for the sake of it because they've got a few extra fixtures now. And I think this one was really tricky because there was the double game week followed by finding out about double game week 25, followed by double game week 25. If we knew a bit earlier, then that would be fine. So it's these like information points that are really useful and kind of working out. I think this is one of the things that I find the models really useful for is I can evaluate how much better it is to bring Kulusevski in for that period than not, and whether that's worth it for the gamble of an extra fixture. So sometimes it'll happen. And I know some people, I think, was it Dom Solanke got injured in game week 20? And a lot of them just moved to Dominic Calvert-Lewin because they're like, okay, like Everton, well, I mean, they had a double. It was confirmed. Or was it? It was all but confirmed. So they were like, okay, I'll go Dominic Calvert-Lewin because I need to sell someone. Everton have a good fixture, then they have a double. And it didn't pay off because Dominic Calvert-Lewin got injured immediately and everyone had to buy Beto and Ndiaye. So if you'd waited, it would have paid off. But I think that was not a mistake. Like, I think the fixture was there. You're going from an injured Dom Solanke to I forgot what fixture was, Southampton at home, Everton, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Yeah. So you're gaining there and you've got the extra one. And it's worth going Dominic Calvert-Lewin over, I don't know, Evan Nielsen, maybe. I don't think he was back yet, but like someone who doesn't have that extra fixture upside. So I think that's where I'd go, okay, I'm going to go for this guy who might double, but it probably needs to be, I was making a move here anyway. I'll take the upside. It's rarely I'm making this move because there's this potential extra. I think it's almost always just better to wait for the info because sometimes as well, a player gets injured and you're like, oh, actually, I suddenly need the striker and not the mid. So I need to move funds around and I need the 2 transfers to do that. So I think I tried to get into a spot where I could get to either Watkins or Son with my budget because I knew that one of them would double. And I was like, I need a bit of budget, but I don't know if I need it in mid or forward. So I sold Isak a week earlier than I was planning to instead of Ndiaye. Can't remember. I was like, I sell him now, even though I'd want him next week, because it leaves me flexible to go to Watkins or to Son. And in the end, it was Watkins, and I went that way. But I could have got more points by committing to, okay, it's probably going to be Watkins. I'll keep Isak and then do Isak to Watkins. But it meant that if Spurs won, I could have gone to Son. So I think, again, that's that valuing positions of flexibility, finding it quite. But it's hard. It's hard to do because like. Doesn't always pay off, and it's hard to like evaluate backwards and look back and go, yeah, I got into a flexible position and didn't use it. It's hard to like see whether it was good or not. But when it pays off quite nicely because people are shorter transfers and you can go this nice path and go get Heung-min Son when no one can get him and that kind of thing. Don't know.
What we do now? We can look at what the good people did.
I was going to say we're looking at what the good people did. I mean. On the top, you've got the Analytics Elite 64 average. In green, you've got the Elite 64. And then in yellow, you've got, as of the end of the season, the FPL's top 500 average. I mean, you've basically spoken through this already because we're basically looking at your transfer path. Basically.
I mean, I kind of followed the Analytics Elite 64 guys to talk about us having all the same teams. We didn't have the same teams, but a lot of us were rolling transfers at the same time.
Yeah.
But yeah, Elite 64, and I think this was kind of showing there's a period in the middle where the Analytics guys were rolling a lot more than everyone else. All the other strong managers, other managers did well. But generally, you can see that these peaks and troughs are kind of being followed by most managers. And this is an average. Like you're going to get managers in there who kind of got way high or way low at different points. It's not like you must do it this way. But I think it was quite nice to see that the managers who did well were doing quite similar to the managers who we think normally do. So these elite samples, they did tend to do pretty similar to the guys who ended up doing well, even if I think a lot of these guys didn't have great seasons. Like it was kind of a down year for some of the better managers.
But even as you say, like the peaks and troughs are slightly different, but the path is the same. It's basically game week 17, 18. There's almost an extra transfer was rolled in the Analytics in the Analytics Elite 64. And then from there, the next 10 weeks kind of follow the same path anyway. They both drop in 19, 20, and then they spike up in 22, down again in 26, and then they just go down again in 29. It all follows a very, very, very similar path.
It feels Gladiator, the original Gladiator type film. The scene in the Colosseum where it's the hold type space. There's almost like designated weeks there, isn't there, in the analytics where it's I'm now like, Jesse, you need to tell us when the hold weeks are. And how early did you know that was a hold week? Look, there's some weeks here where we don't make a move here. So
I think it was game week 23. You can see quite how high up. It's almost the full transfer that the analytics guys go up. And I remember, I think that was about when I started sharing the data about the analytics elite guys versus the elite guys, just to compare the samples. And I'm pretty sure that no one made a transfer in that group. The whole league rolled.
That's what I'm saying. It's amnesty. But we're not doing it this way.
No. Sorry, one guy made a transfer, but it's because he had 5 already. So he made one transfer with 5, and one guy with 5 transfers burned a transfer. I don't think he meant to. I think he meant to do something, but the only ones who made a transfer that were the ones who had 5 already, because we knew that we were getting some info the following week, and everyone's teams were kind of okay. But I don't think we decided. It's not like we discussed it and said no one make a transfer. So we were laughing at it afterwards. We were like, I posted the chart, and it's like no transfers. Like one guy bought Calvert-Lewin. And we're like, was I the only one who made a move? I was like, what? Was like,
we need the heads up of when these hold weeks are there.
Yeah, but I don't know if I necessarily knew everyone else was going to do it, but it was funny when nobody made a move apart from, I think it was FPL Hedgehog had 5, and
And obviously you're waiting for information, and you're literally waiting until that point. So I guess because the projections that we get from Ben, from Tala, from James, all this information is good information, but at the same time, these are guys using past information to predict where these future games are going to land. There's bits and pieces of information, and ultimately the Premier League may decide to do something altogether different. And it is only until that is announced that becomes a reality, right? So that's why you're saying you want to be flexible at the point this information arrives, so you know how to navigate the next 4, 5, 6 weeks and beyond. Right?
Yeah, so I think 24-25 was a bit different because we knew
you'd have had Carabao semi as well that week. I think
it was
around there as well.
If this result, then this fixture. If this result, then this fixture. Whereas after that, it was, I don't know what they're going to do. But it is quite interesting as well that the period from 20 to the end, which is sort of following when the doubles and blanks are. And obviously you'd kind of expect people to be rolling and using transfers at the same point there, because doubles and blanks are quite important and you get extra fixtures and this and the other. But actually even game week 2 to 19, people are kind of using transfers here and there and following these fixture switches or premium switches or this, that, and the other. People found the places to make them there as well.
Jostling for position, isn't it? It's the first half of the race. You don't want to be left out. Got to keep doing stuff.
Yeah, but then I wonder how much of that is people going, I think this is what everyone else is going to do, or just us kind of all coming to similar conclusions that these are places to make moves. This is the fixture changes. This is where I think it makes sense to make transfers with my team. And I don't know whether
on the fly did we overlay our transfers on this. I mean, yours is obviously versus the analytics.
I didn't do them together, all in one graph.
Well, we know where mine is. It's the straight line.
It's just a straight line down the bottom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I just spike up early, don't I? And then I'm just down the bottom all the time.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I can do that afterwards if we want.
No, that's fine. I was literally going to do it live. I was just going to chuck it over the top.
Go for it.
But what about? Let's look at the let's do the wildcard stuff because we have. So I think that's the interesting one. So I mentioned to you about that. I quite like the idea already of going later this season, whether it's sort of 12, 13-ish, or potentially even later than that for this season. But I'm quite nervous that it almost can be done, or is and that people did well in that space, but you've charted some of the what you needed to do in terms of like saving transfers, not saving transfers, and how to play the game and do it well.
Yeah, so I wanted to see. So this is those three samples we had before, plus Adam and Baker. So it's about 600 odd managers, top 500, 64 analytics elite guys, 64 elite 64. There's a small overlap. I think there's managers in both. So it's about 620 managers. And I think I split it into early wildcard, middle wildcard, and late wildcard, which is just about 6 game weeks at a time, but I think kind of fitted. So early is 2 to 6, middle wildcard is 7 to 12, and late wildcard is 13 to 19. I think they all used their wildcard. I think actually some of them didn't. So they're probably not in this sample. Maybe Susan burned her first wildcard, but so there's about 300 odd played wildcards 2 to 6, about 200 played 7 to 12, and about 100 played 13 to 19 of this sample of well, I don't know, good managers. And I wanted to see whether actually they were doing much different with their transfer patterns. And some of this is I was aiming at a late wildcard, so I tried to play like this. But I think also some of it is my team ended up lending itself to doing that because of the moves I made. So there's a bit chicken and egg thing. So I know when I set my team up in game week 1, I didn't want to put a wildcard time in. I thought like there's going to be lots of times for it to happen. Something will go wrong and I'll play it then. So I'm going to try and thread the needle through what I want to do, and as soon as it becomes useful to do it, I'll use my wildcard. So almost used it in 3. Like I think if I'd had one more injury, I would have played it. But I decided not to. Managed to get through 6 and through to 8, and then realized that actually 8 was quite a good spot and I could attack a few things with that, and had the transfers, so played it in 8. But probably wasn't too far away from actually being able to roll it and play through to 10 or 12 or even 19. So I'm sure a lot of these managers weren't necessarily aiming at it. So it's a bit of a sort of result of what happened. Like if I want to play it late and in game week 2, 15 of my 15 players have been transferred out of the league, I'll probably wildcard. I think that's fair enough. So some of it is adaptability, but the later wildcards did roll a bit more at the start because they weren't this like 6 to 7 transition. They weren't going to use their wildcard, or they didn't use their wildcard for it. Whereas the earlier ones were able to set up to manage the transition with the wildcard, or any transfers they would have used in game weeks 3 to 5, they wildcarded instead. So then they used those transfers to game week 6. So you see they sort of got a little bit ahead of everyone else. And then they're kind of similar, a bit up and down. But then there's this period 13 to 19 where the guys who are wildcarding early are starting to run a bit low on transfers because maybe they've had a few more issues, but they've got ahead early on. And the middle wildcarders are actually getting ahead on transfers because they've wildcarded recently. Everyone's still trending upwards. But then you get to game week 19 and the middle and late wildcarders are on a similar amount because the middle wildcarders have used some to get in 19 because that's a bit of a transition, and the early wildcarders are doing the same, but they're lower down. And then they all climb and fall towards the end and sort of end up pretty, I guess, second wildcard. So it's not too dissimilar, other than I think just off the bat, you're going to want to be in a position to be rolling, which is something you can aim for, but also sometimes something that happens. If your team is in good shape, you can keep rolling. So, yeah, I'm not too sure exactly what we can take from this, but
yeah, I guess I'm looking at it saying is the late wild card, you kind of had to open yourself up to the ability to do it by accumulating early. Whether you premeditated that you were going to do that, or whether, hey, guess what? I've now got transfers in hand. I can probably push a bit longer.
I can manage this upcoming transition with a couple of transfers.
Keep with everybody else by through transfers, and I've got stuff. And you can see there. I think the interestingly is you can see sort of game weeks 7 and game week 12 or so is you could see they suddenly started to be using a bit more transfers, those guys, to try and keep up with those windows. And then gain. And we're in a very strong position. It's really interesting. I think the last sort of, let's say, 15 or so game weeks is virtually whichever way you went in that first one, the path rejoined almost in terms of number of transfers.
Yeah, I mean,
interestingly, I'd like to see this plotted against some kind of ranked tiers, because you want to because we're talking about, you know, the best of the best managers here. You know, it is going to be relatively similar when it comes to 23, 24 down to the end, because everybody's engaged, everybody's working around the same parameters, right? If you've got people that are at, you know, 1.5 million working their way down, or 800k working their way down, I'd like to see how that pans out, because you should be able to see a correlation with how much people deviate from this kind of level of engagement. And you can, because otherwise I think I could read this, and if I didn't know what the sample was, I could probably say, well, you know, I can lose it against the field in the first 19 weeks because I can diverge from what could be a really good strategy, and then in the last 10, 12 weeks I'm pretty much stuck because everyone's going to be doing the same thing, which I think in some ways is true, but at the same time you're going to pass a lot of people on the way past as long as you're doing the right things in those last 10 to 12 weeks, right?
I think also these are the average transfers remaining. So there were people doing slightly different things. So obviously you're kind of still using them at similar points, but you might be taking quite a different path early on. Or I know that there were a few people who held on to Nkunku and Kwanzaa and still rolled up to 4 or 5 and then wildcarded in sort of 10 or 12 and did quite well. Whereas other guys who had those guys played a wildcard in 3 or 4, even though they had quite similar teams. So individual managers within here will still be sort of reaching those edge points. It's just that on average, or on the whole, the average manager in there is kind of following these trends. But that isn't to say that you must follow the trend, and or else you won't do well. Managers within here will be taking very different paths. I know people took a few different trip strategies. We talked a bit before the pod about Tom Dollamore playing his wildcarding game week 3, 11-if did it as well, and then having lots of transfers, and then he did a free hit 29 wildcard 30 back to back whilst holding 4 or 5 transfers, and then used those 4 or 5 in game week 34 instead of the free hit. So people were using them in 34, but some people free hitted in 34 and used all the transfers in 33. So there was still kind of room to maneuver within there a bit more, especially if you take a different chip path at the end. I think there are different avenues. So I had my assistant manager in game week 33 to 35 and played my free hit in 37, and that let me go quite different to everyone else. Even though I'm kind of following the same trend, you can end up on quite different routes. But it might be a case that actually your transfer usage or rate of transfers is probably unlikely to change too much from what everyone else is doing. But what you do with those can change quite a lot. You can take a very different path in that sense. But maybe using 4 transfers in a week when everyone's rolling, and then doing nothing in a week where everyone's using 4 transfers is less likely to pay off as a contrarian route, especially if there's doubles involved. Tends to help. I don't know, but yeah, I can have a think.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
And then we did players by wildcard timing as well, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to see if people had started with different teams. Like, is it like, oh, everyone who had this guy ended up wildcarding late because he didn't get injured, or vice versa? I didn't realize how many people owned Henderson at the start. I didn't realize he was quite so popular. Everyone had him across the set. But I think you can see that Haaland, fewer people started with Haaland if they wildcarded late, and more of them started with Salah, which I think kind of tracks. Like, you can see that makes sense. But there wasn't actually as much difference around that than I thought. There's maybe a bit more Arsenal defence on the midterm wildcarders, and maybe a bit heavier on Jota and Nkunku, those kind of guys early on. But I don't know. Is there anything that stands out to you from this?
I think the Haaland Salah one is probably the only big thing on here that I can see. There is a couple of things like, like a slightly premium defender in Pedro Porro, for example. Like, I think when you start the seasons, everyone's at these kind of even point 0 or 0.5 price points, aren't they? So when you're looking at where you can go and do that stuff, like Porro was one of the very few 5.5s when you looked at it that was at the start of the season. You were like, well, if I come off him, I don't really know where I'll go to him. So he was like an obvious person that you'd put in if you were going to wildcard. Some good fixtures, weird price point. If you were going to sit around with him for a while, you're like, I don't really want that 5.5 guy because one, the fixtures went crappy, and then secondly, it was where would I go with him? It's weird.
Yeah, it was like you're going to find the 0.5 to go and get Gabriel or Gvardiol and moving things around, and that's taking 2 transfers, not one. And
exactly. So I think there is that. The interesting ones obviously is probably the Salah over Haaland piece. It still surprises me how many people went both, and it was a lot more than I thought it was. I think a lot of people thought you could just go, you had to go one or the other, and both. A lot of people still did it.
Yeah, I don't think I looked at both too hard. I even had one draft with neither that probably wouldn't have gone very well. Don't know, but I think what I can kind of take from this is that it's probably less to do with the kind of players you're starting with and more to do with how you react to the first 4 or 5 game weeks. You still want to be trying to pick, well, it might be surprising, you still want to pick good players. But you can see that like there were fewer people with Kwanzaa in the late wildcard group,
not just
and in Nkunku,
not just those guys, but Kwanzaa, Ben Johnson, Barco, and Harry Winks, or any 4 points. So I think those that went the late, there is some form of evidence that there was plan involved, that they were going to be late rather than it happened to them.
But equally, I was going to say that might be that they decided not to pick those players not in order to wildcard late. But
that's what I'm saying. So that suggests
more
that
of them survived.
Yeah,
I think I'd argue that there's a survivorship bias thing in there. So if you manage to avoid those guys, because it might have been that Eze moved to City and lost all his minutes.
Yeah,
and those were and Nkunku does play, and those are the guys who managed to wildcard late were the ones who dodged Eze but picked Nkunku.
Yeah, good point.
So you don't always know. I think it would be more. I don't know. I think that's hard to kind of pick apart unless I interview all 600 of these managers.
The 4.0 defense and the double 4.0. There was quite a few people that went sort of double 4.0 and a 4.5 mid. I think I did that. I think I went double 4.0 and a 4.5 mid. Well, I was never going to make it to game week 19 or whatever it was.
Seems unlikely. Yeah. So I think if you want to leave late open, then you're trying not to pick those players. But sometimes players who we think are good just don't pan out that way, and you've got to be ready to wildcard early if you need to, or you might even pick one of them, and maybe Barco does start and keep playing, and you're able to wildcard late even though you picked him. And so it's hard. Yeah, it's hard to pick apart. But given that it's all quite similar, I think it is mostly transfer usage in the first 5 or 6 weeks. But that might be a symptom of last season's slate, as in the set of players and the prices. We might end up with a spot where there are so many more different structures that people are picking from, and actually only one of them is going to manage to do it late, whereas most people seem to do it here with Salah, Haaland a little bit, but even people who did it late didn't have Salah and did have Haaland at the start. So we'll see. See what happens when the prices come out.
I was going to say, is there any kind of discussion? I guess there's no real discussion that can be had about how this might pan out for the current season. I mean, there is a question. We got a question in the Discord. So from an analytical perspective, and let's assume we've got the prices right. How do you approach how do you approach the start of the season? Is there a lot of emphasis on last season's data, or is it a near start from scratch kind of approach?
I mean, last season's data is still very useful. It's not like it's suddenly, someone's not going to suddenly be amazing when they weren't. There's a few people break through, but generally, if we're getting really excited about a player and not a lot has changed, then we don't really have a reason to move what happened in the last couple of seasons. that way. So if people are getting really excited about some guy who's scored a few goals in pre-season, it's like, well, it's unlikely that he's suddenly twice as good as he was over the last 3 years. So that's certainly a place to start. But I think more and more I've noticed that actually I'm kind of relying on the market data for a lot of this stuff. And they still are quite difficult to predict. Like they don't always know, and they can get it more accurate, and they can factor in all these kind of like softer things, less so than like last season's data. It's more like who's the new transfers coming in, this, that, and the other. But the error bars are certainly still wider. Like it's not like the markets know and the models don't, and vice versa. Like the market is a model, it's just priced slightly differently. So I think I try and take it as like almost to the max from a structural point of view, almost take it to the maximum of this flexibility thing that I talk about, of like, it's more likely that some of the players I have in my starting lineup are going to have been misevaluated. They're going to not be playing. They're going to not be as good as I think they were. They're going to not have penalties when I thought they did, vice versa. The team's going to be a lot worse than I thought it was because the manager doesn't click. So it's more likely that lots of my assumptions about the players will change. So I want the team to structurally be in a point of view where it can adapt to that and go, okay, like I don't usually pick out players who I think I'm maybe undervaluing them. What happens if they're really good? Because usually you just, everyone's finding that out together in 5-6 weeks time. Maybe some of the premium players, if Saka's been out for a while and it's like there's question marks about whether he's fully fit or not, I'd be like, okay, like is he going to be back in game week 5-6? Is he going to come back firing? But he's that's not a great example. He's probably fine. Or maybe it's like a new signing. How's he going to fit in? So I think from a prediction point of view, it's a mixture of markets and previous season data and I guess vibes, maybe a bit of like your own opinions sprinkling in there, and it's getting the balance right. I know that's kind of describing the process rather than giving this much season on data and this much on previous, but it's previous season data is a good benchmark. Market data is a good benchmark, and then your own opinions to move up and down with the knowledge that your own opinions might have more weighting now because the market data is less sure, and with the knowledge that the error bars are much wider. So It's not that my assumption is wrong, it's that the range of potential outcomes is larger. So Arsenal might be the best team in the league by some distance, or they might be a title challenger, or they might be, they might drop off. It might just not work at all. A bit like what happened to Man City this year. Like they weren't rubbish, but they certainly weren't anywhere near where we thought they'd be. So that's how good Arsenal might be. And I'll probably put them somewhere in the middle, but I need to be ready for them to be any one of those potential ones, and the players and so on. So
you've got the most variance occurring at the start of the season. I guess it's even more difficult because we're going to see multiple examples of this season for players that last season we had a good handle on what they could and could not do. I mean, you'll start obviously with the fact that Thomas Frank is at Spurs. It's not Ange Postecoglou. You've got Brian Mbumo, who probably won't be at Brentford, might be at United, might be at Spurs. Kudus might be at Spurs. Wissa might or might not be at Brentford. And if he's at Brentford, Thomas Frank isn't the manager. You've got Saka, you've just mentioned. Chelsea are just about to sell or have sold them Madueke, right?
Yeah.
Arsenal have just signed
Gyökeres might be on penalties.
Gyökeres might be on penalties. They've just signed a striker. Does that even make Saka better? Like, there's all sorts of things here that, like, and all we've really spoken about there is two players moving within the league and one manager changing. And we've mentioned 5 or 6 7 different things there that could be very, very different. So you're right. I think a lot of things could be, you will have the most variable outcomes in your predictions at the start. I think that's the point, because that was one of the questions. That was a follow-up question from Jonathan. So he mentions like good player going to underperforming team versus good one going to a better team. Brian Mbumo is the perfect example here, I think.
Going to a better team or a worse team? What are you saying?
I'm not saying anything. No comment.
Yeah, I think this is again back to the previous point as well, is where I think I prefer the sort of team first approach again, because it gives you a good anchoring of where you're going. and your margin for error is sort of a bit wider. Of like, okay, like
Man
more
United will
accurately get
improve.
Yeah, but also like Man United are going to be about this good, so that limits the range at which I can put Brian and Bomo at.
Yeah.
Because if I start going all the players first, it's unlikely that all my Man United projected goals are going to add up to what I actually think Man United are, unless I've kind of got a bit lucky with it. Whereas if I start the other way, then if Man United are about this range of good and Bomo is about this range of portion of Man United's goals, then actually that gives me a not a narrow range, but like a reasonably accurate range without having done too much thought about where he stands in those ranges. So putting a range on the team and then on the player tends to put them in a reasonable spot. So if when João Pedro moves to Chelsea, then I think that he's probably going to be scoring more goals for Chelsea than he is for Brighton, but he's not going to get way better. And if I overshoot, then I'm going to go, okay, well, suddenly he's scoring 40% of Chelsea's goals, and that seems too high. So it's more that, okay, he's a good player, and he's playing striker for Chelsea, and strikers for Chelsea have tended to get about this portion of Chelsea's goals. So if Chelsea are about this good, João Pedro moving to Chelsea isn't going to make Chelsea amazing or terrible. It might make them a bit better or a bit worse. So move up and down. João Pedro is going to sit in this range, and that generally puts you somewhere pretty accurate until we start getting more data or more reason to believe that he's a way better striker than Chelsea have ever had, or he's taking penalties off Palmer or vice versa. So I think that's kind of the way I try and think about giving the goals out to some extent, and how good these teams are.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned João Pedro straight away. Obviously, we've talked about Burmo, we've talked about Gyökeres coming in, and talk about pens there. Like penalties is really, really interesting because, like, I think what football fans can do and what football fans tend to do is they talk in very binary numbers, right? So, like, how many goals do you think so and so is going to score? I think it's going to score 14 goals, 15 goals. People will give a number, people will be defined, whereas you're talking about ranges more than the actual sort of specific number. But like, if I had to put you on the spot, like, do you think Brian Mbeumo, one, has pens at United, and two, if he goes there, and two,
So
if he doesn't,
yeah.
well, yeah, if he goes there, and two, do you think he scores more or less goals under Amorim than he would do under whoever the Brentford manager is? I can't remember his name already.
Keith Andrews.
Okay.
Well, I mean, because there's also the level of like, am I comparing it to how many I think Mbeumo would normally have scored last season, and actually he's scored more than that, so he overperformed. So is it this Brentford or is it last season's Brentford? And
You can't help yourself, can you?
yeah, no, I know. I'll sit on the fence, please. I think I think he's probably unlikely to be taking penalties off Bruno Fernandes if he's staying, as my personal opinion. But again, that's a belief I will hold until I receive more info. And in my mental model, or even my actual model, I will give some share to Mbeumo probably, and I'll adjust that. And maybe that's something I'll be thinking about at the start of the season, is like, Mbeumo might suddenly take penalties and become a lot better asset. And if he's priced at 9 million and I don't have a spot to get to him, and I think if he has penalties, I will want him, I need to be ready to get to him. But if I know that him having penalties doesn't actually mean he's good enough to go and get to, I don't need to think about it too much. So I think the loss of penalties, which I'm sitting on the fence again, which I think he might have, if he might move, if he might, blah, blah, is enough that he's probably going to score less goals than he would have done at Brentford, because I think Man United aren't going to get that much better. They're already not great. And they haven't, like, even if they bought a whole new amazing team, it's got to fit together. So at the start of the season, it's not going to be necessarily that great. And they've bought some good players. I think Cunha's really good. I think they've bought players that will make them a lot better now. There's a question as to whether it makes them better over the course of the next few years, whether that's a good decision. You can listen to other podcasts about that. I'd say Mbeumo is worse for goal projections if he's playing at Man United than if he's playing at Brentford, probably.
Fair enough.
That's my wishy-washy answer.
No, that's good.
Oh,
I even said
okay.
probably at the end, even though I'd said a definitive statement. But yeah, no, well, that's why it's tricky, is, you know, and that's why I think I like to use these kind of ranges and range of outcomes. And I think that's why when people say the model was wrong because he scored lots of goals, it's like, well, it wasn't wrong. It just he's ended up at this side
Top
of
end
the
of the range.
range I put him on, and
Yeah.
sure, if he scores 100 goals, I'll say I was wrong. Like I didn't think he'd do that. But if he scores 20, that's like, oh, that's good. But maybe I slightly underestimated him. If he scores none, you know. So I think that's my issue with. I've turned this into another point. That's my issue with people who say the models are wrong. Is they're projecting a range of distribution, not a singular outcome. But that's what's making the games tricky.
We want to go through pens? You want to talk about pens specifically?
Yeah.
I did want to ask a question of pens because I think analytics and pens have been good friends. Have been good friends for many years.
There's been times when they haven't.
That's there.
Well, most of analytics managers didn't have Bruno Fernandes in this 2021 season where he scored, I don't know, 100 penalties. 11 penalties he had,
11
whatever it was,
penalties.
Because it wasn't sustainable for Man United to keep getting penalties. It turned out it was, but we thought it wasn't.
Do you think that penalty season, so 2021, for anyone listening, there was 124 pens in the season.
Quite a lot.
So history lesson is, to the extent, is VAR came in 1920. When VAR came in, we saw a slight drop in penalties, and I kind of expected that back thinking about the time. A lot of the times were stuff, we'll now know when they dive.
Mm.
Yeah,
that was kind of the thing, wasn't it? We'll get them. It wasn't. We'll get more penalties where the refs have missed these things. It was about
spot this
show us a
handball
trick.
that was maybe a handball, whatever. Yeah.
And so I think we saw that reaction, but then there was a little drop in goals and stuff, and then they went nuts. In 2021, anyone had touched anything, we could find it, we're giving it. And we had penalties everywhere. We had 124 penalties in 2021, with slight revision. And we've had a bit of normality, probably, I would say, is 103 penalties in 21-22, 98 in 22-23, 106 in 23-24, and then last season it's just 83, which is quite the drop off over that considerable period of time. We've had seasons where that's happened, 2017-18 and 2014-15, and similar numbers on that one. But 83 pens, I always listen out for, like, the refs always come out with, at some point, PGMOL come out with their, like, a sort of statement intent for the season. Like, it's, we're going to let it run a bit more, we're going to penalise this, or we're going to do this and do those things and try and do it. But can you make any form of prediction on, we had 83 penalties last season, what's it going to be next season?
I was going to say, hopefully PGMOL will just say, we've got 100 penalties to give out and we'll dish them out accordingly. We've run out of penalties. I'm very sorry. I think season to season, VAR was the big one. But I haven't really looked much into whether the rules are going to have a big difference. And I think, like, one of the changing rules that was looked at a bit before was when they talked about adding more stoppage time on. And actually, how many more goals are we going to expect because of that? And actually, obviously, that increases the penalties because there's more time on the pitch. So there's more penalties and that should increase it slightly. But I think there's quite a lot of variation in just penalties being given that isn't really very predictable. And I haven't done a deep dive into the rule changes every season and how it's correlated. But my understanding is mostly that this season was just a bit of a dip, just because we should expect some dips and peaks with events that are semi-random. They're not fully random, but I didn't see anything at the start of this season. I didn't see anyone talking about we're going to expect less penalties. I think the takes are more often made in hindsight. Oh yes, well, this rule came in and that meant this, that, the other. And maybe there's not like there's no truth to that. But unless people are saying it at the start of the season, I think it's more likely that it was just a bit of noise. And we should expect if if this said 100 penalties every single season, same number, that would be more surprising than there's an 80 and a 120. Like we should expect that to happen. So I'm probably expecting about 90 to 100 next year, unless I hear something different.
I've often put quite a lot of weight on something, I look at this, a weight on that PGRML direction. But if we do the teams one, I'm not sure. I'm not sure like the change was sort of PGML led as opposed to potentially some team led data. So if you look at 23, 24, the teams used to be the old saying. Do you remember like Man United when Man United used to get loads and loads of penalties every single season? Everyone used to say, "Oh my God, it's penalties at Old Trafford," and I used to argue quite often and say, well, they'd spend more time in the opposing team box than any other team in the league, so therefore there's a good chance they end up with the most penalties. Like that tends to be how it works. And so therefore the teams that do well tend to have the most penalties. And if you look in the 2023-24 season, you've got, 3 teams with double digits, which is Chelsea, Arsenal and Man City. And then you've got Newcastle and Liverpool with 9 each, not far behind them. Like, then you take away, so we dropped 20 penalties this season. Well, Chelsea, Arsenal, and Man City alone dropped 21 penalties from season to season. So, is it PGR led, or is it 3 teams that were getting loads, were maybe a bit more expressive in how they played, got a bit different? The change to Maresca, the leaning into defence, I think more without, no one in the Arsenal team scored double digits last season. There's kind of a lean into the defence side for their world.
A lot of their attackers got injured, I suppose, but
a lot of attackers got injured.
Saka probably would have hit it if he'd been fit.
Yeah. If Saka was fit all season, would they have had more than 2 penalties? I suspect they probably would. Martinelli had some time out as well. The sort of winger type guys. I think there is more. I am leaning into, there's some profile bits for it. I was looking at who had the most, like who won the most penalties in it, and there's certain traits of players from it. It's like 23-24 season. Anthony Gordon had 6 penalties. He won in that season. He's kind of the type of guy that will try and win 6 penalties.
He's a great diver. I love it.
He's a great diver.
He's a great diver. So I'll cheer him on.
Raheem Sterling for Chelsea that season got 3 penalties. He's always been incredible at earning penalties for a season. Well, he wasn't playing for them in 24-25. I mean, maybe Arsenal should have played him more just to try and get some
penalties. They want corners. That's what they want.
But yeah. Maybe they were like, oh, I don't really have to care.
We don't want pens. We want corners. There we are.
But I think, it's there are some profiles of guys. João Pedro, for example, is definitely that. We've talked about it ad nauseum on the pod, like week in, week out, that he finds ways of putting himself in positions, not to dive, but to ensure that he receives the contact that will get himself a penalty. He had 3 in the league last season, 2 in the league the season before, which, but wins and then takes, and he had a load in the Europa that he did.
Evan Nielsen did 3 in a game.
Evan Nielsen did 3 in a game. He did 5 in the season.
He decided, I'm getting some penalties today.
We had some profiles at 5.
What Areola said, go get some pens.
5. Go get some pens. Yeah.
And Liverpool just have Salah, right?
Yeah, Salah's pretty. Do you think the players are thinking, like, can I earn a penalty from this position? Or
I think they're a little cleverer than they used to be, because I think with VAR, it's not like you could just be like, oh, I'm just going to dive. You have to have the ability to.
Those were the days.
There are certain players now that are very, very good at putting them. We've seen a number of them. Anthony Gordon, we've seen do it, like put that leg in between it. That you're now going to kick me. I'm going to take that contact.
Yeah.
I think there are players that have become more smart at doing it, and there's others where they haven't changed their ways, and now they're not getting the pens that they would have got previously. So I think it is. Again, how do you know that from game week 1?
And also, like, what actual portion, like, because I think you used the phrase creating a penalty when we were discussing it before, but I hadn't really looked into like what portion of penalties are created using it and like what portion are random. So
Yeah,
I think a cross that hits a handball is pretty
it's
random.
random. Yeah,
Or you might just, happen to beat your man and you're taken down because the defender lashes out or something like that. So like there are going to be some random penalties. So maybe we should, I think, look at what portion of them are random, what portion of them are things that we think are predictable. But again, they are going to track with, maybe there are a few players who can like move the needle on that. So like
I don't think there
a
are.
team who are
Caicedo
getting
got
this.
two, and I know I can
Yeah.
picture both of them that would touch the ball away in a moment
Yeah.
where I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this contact here.
So you start with Cole Palmer, are you? Or João Pedro,
Like
or
they've got
both?
Caicedo and João Pedro both love it.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
But
yeah.
maybe João Pedro
It's
takes the
like how
pens.
much of that is that the driver, and how much of it is that moving the needle from teams who are more attacking and get this many touches in the box and are creating more chances, are more likely to get pens, and how much is like two teams who are similarly good at that going to be, well, this one's got a diver. I'm not going to refer to them as that. And this one doesn't. Are they going to get more penalties or? So yeah, I think it's quite tricky, but I think generally, as a rule of thumb, it's normally, I think a rule of thumb that some people use is like about 8 to 10% of a team's projected goals is penalties. And that'll fluctuate team to team and game to game and season to season. But as a ballpark, if you're trying to measure it roughly, that's kind of how I would recommend weighting penalties if you're thinking about this guy's now taking the penalties or this guy's not, and vice versa. That's kind of the range that we're looking at.
I think you can risk it more in game. I feel like you can risk maybe not having as many penalties in game well, but I think you will learn through it. That Bruno season, as much as it was ridiculous, anyone who watched it, watching Anthony Martial, watching Rashford, watching Greenwood in that team, they were always looking for it. They were so good at taking like putting the outside of their thigh near a knee. Like they were incredible at doing it. I remember they were almost always the same hit. Is there are definitely teams
A set
that I
play,
feel.
go get a pen. Yeah. I don't know. I've
Yeah,
not really looked into it too much, but
yeah. Not
to
sure
me
you get
they're
too
just
much from
confusing
friendlies.
and random, and
Yeah.
I'll just assign a random variable to it and hope for the pens. But yeah, pens are important. You can see that they're,
Pen share
the
is weird though.
Salah getting 9 penalties is one of the reasons he did so well. He was very good otherwise, but it's probably one of the reasons his gap to Haaland and Saka
Well,
didn't
he
play all the
just kept
games.
getting
But
9. He got
yeah,
9 the season before. Got 9
yeah,
again.
yeah.
Like he just kept doing 9. Um,
That's the one image I didn't get. Actually, it's the one I didn't save. But yeah, Salah had 9 pens, Clivert 6. We talked about, and Boomer and Pedro 5 each.
Salah had 9 the season before, mate. Like it's not like last season wasn't different for him. They're a really attacking team. They spend a lot of time in the box. I
Who's on
know that if
pens for
that.
Spurs? Can you let me know?
I tell you what, it is interesting. I don't know if you heard this, Adam. You see so they've done a Europa, like the journey type videos.
Oh, I haven't watched
They
that yet.
released it. So Madison said, so the game in the Europa where he scored early on, then went off injured. Or did he even score? He did score, and then he got injured, and then there was a penalty. Madison said that he would have taken that penalty.
He's the main man.
So that was
Was
there
that
was
the
obviously no
Solanke
sun
pen?
on that pitch. That was the Solanke pen.
Yeah.
So he did say at that time that he would have taken that penalty with him and Solanke on the pitch. Now, later in the semi-final, we got another pen and they were both on the pitch that time and Solanke took it. So I don't know whether now Solanke's got them. He's got them. And I don't know how that's impacted by if Son's playing.
New manager. As
Thomas Frank will decide.
Yeah. And Bowman will take them when he joins.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I'll do.
Well, we've got the here we go on Kudos, so I don't see I don't see a world
Any good at pens?
Of Boomer. Doesn't take pens.
No.
But that probably impacts Son's minutes a little bit more.
We'll have to see. Maybe we'll get some preseason stuff. But There's still a long way to go. I don't think we need to decide. Should we decide all the penalty takers now, just in case?
It will.
Yeah.
We have been, as a club, Tottenham have been. One of the things I think I probably pay so much interest in penalties is because we are notoriously, for a huge number of years, crap at getting penalties. We're always crap at it. Is certainly crap at it since Kane's left. It's quite visible. It's really visible when you watch it that we don't ever put ourselves in a position where you think we're about to get a penalty here. And so you notice it when other teams do it because you're like, why don't we do that? We say all the time in our chats, why don't we do that? Diving in the box all the time like they're doing and put yourselves in and do the naughty stuff.
I definitely feel like those two were really like late in the season as well. Like I feel like we went like most of the season without a pen, and it was game week 34, game week 38. It was like bang bang. Oh right, Son's on pens. I think it was like a eureka moment. Everyone was kind of waiting for who's on pens for Spurs because nobody knew.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then we got a couple of late ones this season as well.
Yeah.
So it like genuinely we've been appalling at pens. But we know that Thomas Frank has a lot more value in set pieces than previous managers. We know that we've just actually signed it. Well, providing Kudus stuff signed, but it sounds like he's signed. We actually signed a dribbler. We haven't had a man that can dribble a ball for quite some time.
Is that why he's coming in? He's like, I need a man who can win me some penalties.
We need a man that can beat someone. We genuinely don't have many people that are any good at dribbling. Like it's been an issue for some time.
Yeah.
So maybe.
I think we're almost there, guys. Now I think we're almost there. I think because I think just wrapping it up. I think just looking at these are a couple of graphs just showing. The median rank last year and mean points of a number of different, sections of the community almost, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got Analytics Elite in the top right. And then moving down, you've got Elite 1000. Is Elite 64 just Norwegian managers? Is that just literally Norwegian?
Yeah, it's all Norwegian managers.
They have their own section.
Their own Elite 64, yeah.
Why the hell not?
Good.
Yeah, they are.
Mm-hmm.
They're very good.
And then you've got the Elite 64, the Prime, and then the live FPL Legends as well. And if you want to take correlations, here's like 23, 24. It's pretty much the same picture.
Saying that you posted these in the chat, and I was like, it's just a nice ego boost for analytics managers. But I mean, if I'm trying to sell it as a way to play, like it's been provably pretty effective. Maybe you don't want to be playing that way, and that's fine. But I think people who say it doesn't work seems to work. Don't know.
It works.
Got too lucky.
I mean, it works. But like playing, and as I say, I think either consciously or subconsciously, we all have elements of that we're using. And if we're not, like I'd say there's probably, again, that sort of boom bust type situation. And I'm sure there'll be people that watch this and go, we'll get the comments and it'll be like, I finished 4K last season and I didn't look at this once. And you're like, okay.
And
again.
Good managers can exist without analytics if they can, you can still play well. It's not like it's a necessity. It's just that lots of good managers end up using it as a kind of framework because it helps them be consistent. But if you can come to the same conclusions manually, then fine. You don't need it. It's just that it helps you get there for a lot of people.
But again, for you, with your multiple, it helps me
play multiple games well.
Exactly. You don't have to assign more of your brain power than you need to ultimately get to the result that you want, right? Because that's what you're always after, a desired outcome. And I can put a lot of my mental effort into getting there by either calculating things in my brain and working out what I want to do and then being emotional about the result, or you can spend that energy on creating many, 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 many different scenarios with similar assumptions, similar assumptions, and just get a range of results and go, well, I'm going to lean into this one. And it's like decision made only significant pieces of information that come up will change that for you from in a given week.
Yeah, I think it helps you like filter out what's useful info to input into your, is this moving things? Is this moving my assumptions? Is this moving what I think should happen? And what's like just noise? Like because people talk about it all week long, and a lot of it is just talking. It is just noise, but also it's fun. So like, as long as like I will happily engage in some. Well, I'm on a preseason pod before the game's launched. I must be doing something. But I'll happily talk about what might happen at the weekend on a Monday before all the Champions League games are played. But I know that it's not me making a decision there. I shouldn't really be taking anything meaningful from that yet, because by the time it gets to Friday, a lot's going to have changed, and I can use my streamlined process there and work out what's actually impactful. And obviously someone might get injured on the Monday, in which case that's useful. But if someone, a manager quote comes out saying that this guy's fired, looks great in training, it's like, well, I mean, does that actually mean anything? Or is he just trying to big up a guy who's not been playing so well and this, that, and the... And you can tire yourself out following all these threads, but you start to get a feel for what's actually moving these numbers and what is actually having an impact. So I think it helps you with cutting that noise out as well. And that's kind of, I think, a skill that I've learned from playing all the multiple formats. That's like, if I dropped down to just FPL, I think I could be pretty efficient with it, because I've had to play this many games. You have to be really streamlined and efficient. Like I don't have a choice. If I wasn't, I'm gonna run out of time or lose sleep because I'm trying to fit all this stuff in. So you start to get quite streamlined with it and be like, this isn't helping. This is noise. This is, and it's nice to chat about. But if you go like, okay, we need to decide a definitive conclusion to this discussion on Monday, you get, well, no, I just wait. But equally, yeah, it's not like anything you say on the Monday is pointless. It's still fun. It's still, we're here because we like watching and talking about football for the most part. So make sure that that's still fun.
And haircuts are still valuable, yeah? We're not
Very,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Likely to only get those on the Friday, right? Because they need to be ready for the game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there's probably some discounts, like maybe Wednesday and Thursdays, and yeah, very important.
Cool.
Very important.
Just a couple of questions to finish. Basically, just some from the Discord. They're very much, a couple of them are very much, they are very much more football based. Steve says, will Chelsea sign another 6 forwards before the game launches?
I think 7.
7.
Last I heard. Yeah, 7 probably.
Cool. Matt Baird asks a relegation question. Obviously, he knows it's way too early, but if it's not the usual 3 promoted sides, which of the non-promoted teams do you think are most at risk of relegation? An opinion-based one for you.
I think I've always felt like Wolves have been due a relegation for a little while. I think I've always been like, they've been worse than a relegated team over the last 3 or 4 years and sort of been unlucky, especially when, was it Leicester and Leeds went down? I felt like they weren't in the bottom 3 worst teams. But they have made some good stuff. Vitor Pereira's very good, so I still feel like he could do okay. I feel like I'd honestly still put Man United down there. I think I don't think they're a bottom half team, and part of me is like, dude, just would be so funny if they did. So I am going to throw them in if I'm picking 3, and then who else? I think Brentford might struggle. They've lost a lot of their core players.
If they lose those goals,
yeah.
Well, if they lose Mbeumo and then they lose Wisser and they've already lost Norgard and they've lost Thomas Frank, and they've lost Flecken.
It's a worry. Is that bad?
I mean,
that's a good point.
West Ham as well. Like if they lose Kudus, they weren't good last year. I know I back Potter to do well, but their squad's not. They spent all that money on Fulkrug. I don't know what they were doing there. So
yeah, that was odd.
Yeah, probably some of those guys. I expect to be back down the bottom again.
Okay. Firstly, I'll just say
Spurs will be fine. Don't worry.
Cool. And Steve will be buzzing that we haven't mentioned Everton, so we'll just leave it like that.
Okay. Well,
we'll talk about that in the Discord. Brian says, now that you've had some time to think about it, And this is an interesting one, I think, as well for us. Like, what do you think the official FPL? What do you think this Copilot AI, whatever chatbot is going to be like? Do you think in the app?
I don't have high expectations, if I'm being honest. I think there's a lot of, I mean, it's the Premier League have partnered with them rather than like FPL have partnered with them. It's just that that's a place to use it. It's not like FPL have gone, what we need is an AI assistant manager. Like the Premier League's way bigger than FPL. So FPL have partnered with Microsoft, and Microsoft want to push their AI tools, much like other tech companies are. I think for the most part, it sounds like it's not a chatbot per se, but it's basically going to have access to all this Premier League data. And rather than filtering through tables and trying to figure it out yourself, you can write it as a question and say, who scored the most goals for West Ham in this season? And it will be able to find the answer for you. So my understanding, unless I'm wrong, is that it's an easier way to sort through Premier League data rather than it's going to formulate all these opinions for you or, you know, give you solutions. It's more of a bit like if the Premier League had a search function. You've now got this AI agent that sits on top of all that Premier League data. You ask the agent looks it all up and tells you and spits out the answer. So I think it's quite good in that, like, I'm all for people getting more accustomed to this kind of data and more access to data. And if we can reduce the entry barrier for passing through these data tables, because they're all on other third-party websites sometimes, or like, you know, if I'm trying to find expected goals data, I'll go to FBref or other sites. And if I want to do some things with it, like summing things up or finding things out, then I have to write a little code snippet or I do some stuff in some spreadsheets. And if people are able to do that without needing to have those skills, then I'm all for that. But I don't think it's going to be much more than that. I don't think it's going to be this all-powerful, like, you should be making these transfers, doing these things. Like, if I ask it for transfer suggestions, it'll probably just go into the database, like, because the FPL site's got its own projected points. They're not actually on the site, but it's in the API for the next game week. So I imagine what it will do is something very simple, like, I want I'm selling Salah, find me a replacement for Salah, and it'll go search for the midfielders, filter by midfielders cheaper than Salah, and sort by the projected points that are in the API that aren't great, and go, here are the three players you can consider, and it's Saka and it's Palmer and it's Wirtz, and you go, well, yeah, I could have worked that out. But for the very casual manager, that's good. That's,
I think
suddenly got a short list of three players, and you go, oh yes, no, I'm an Arsenal fan, I want Saka. I forgot I could get Saka, something like that. So
I think that's how
it's not going to change much at all for people like us. But
no, I think it just improves. I think it just improves the experience for those that want to use it in that way. It's funny, you know, while you did that, I asked Copilot on my computer to actually build an FPL Game Week 1 team. Funnily enough, and based on some assumed prices as well.
It's too early. Or...
Well, I did ask. I said, assuming some predicted prices, please can you build a Game Week 1 team? So it started giving me Kelleher 4.5, Pickford 5 million. Frimpong 5.5, Kukurea 5.5, although I think it could be more. Lewis Hall, Gabriel, and Milenkovic. Salah, Rodgers, Mbumo, Brentford or new club. Like, it's quite interesting. Saka and Palmer, and Haaland, Isak, and Cunha.
I think it's got too much money.
At 99.5 million.
I think that's. I'm pretty sure that's
doesn't sound right, but
it doesn't sound right, does it? But then all the defenders are cheap and the keepers are cheap.
Yeah, is that a full 15, or is that not?
3, 5, 5, 2. Yeah.
All right. No, you need 3 forwards. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
3 forwards, 2 keepers. Yeah.
3, 5, 5, 2. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, I mean, that's fine, but that's the kind of thing that you can go to other sites and get, or you can watch a YouTube video and get. Like, it's not revolutionary. It's just it's on the app now.
Yeah. I think people will use that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how can I get the what's the easiest way I can get a team together? Is it I can watch 20 minutes of FPL Harry or other YouTube channel, do I have to
Above
scan and
Average
find
FPL.
where is it, or Above Average FPL?
Mhm.
I wouldn't follow those guys' advice on teams. Pretty loose and aggressive and stuff like that. So, but yeah, or can I just go into the app and say, I need a game week 1 team, please? And it just goes,
Yeah, I've got 5
Done.
minutes. Can you just
Thanks.
give me a player that's not rubbish? And off you go.
import,
Yeah.
import. And then
I
off it
think
goes.
People conflate AI and analytics when actually they're quite different. And I'm not saying that AI has no use and analytics is the best, or it's not as binary as that. But like AI tools are very different. I think the issue is that like a few of the people who have analytics team rating tools will call it an AI tool, but it's not actually AI. It's just that's an industry problem. That's not a FPL problem. That's tech.
But I would say
anything kind of robotics, analytics, data sciencey is branded as AI.
Yeah.
And this is AI, this Copilot thing, but there isn't really any AI in FPL at the minute. It's just some tools say it's
the definition for me would be something that would essentially, it would scrape data from absolutely everywhere with the rules of the game, and then decide by itself, and it would evolve to decide what's important and what's not important.
Yeah.
And it would change its parameters continuously so that then it would develop the best path.
Yeah.
And it would take everything into consideration.
And giving you some of the data back in an easier to read format.
Yeah.
Still useful, but like most analytics tools are doing a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
I think this might be the longest podcast we've ever done. I don't even know. Well, I don't know because I started recording before we even started, but it's over an hour after Baker's bedtime, so he's.
It is over an hour. I need to go to bed. Look, I'm old. This is it. We're done.
That's all right.
But
You got to rest up for the new season.
We found that repeatedly we can spend 2 hours talking before the game even launched. So
wonderful.
We're definitely addicts.
Yeah. I love it.
Can't go away from that.
I love it.
Pleasure.
JC, always a pleasure.
Great.
Thank you very much for joining us. Remember, everyone, if you do want to see more content from us, then please do drop that subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a review on Spotify, etc. Hit the like button, drop us a comment, show us your game week 1 teams, predicted prices and all that, as JC asked you to do earlier on.
Please.
Make sure you're following JC on X, and you can go and find him at FPL Spaceman. You still there?
The account's still there. I'm pretty dormant. I'm mostly on Blue Sky now.
Okay, over on Blue Sky.
It's still there.
And
what's the Blue Sky address?
Oh, johnnyc.bluesky. Whatever it is. App. Can't remember. You'll find me. It's linked
Somewhere.
from my Twitter. Go to my Twitter and find it there.
And you can also
or don't follow these guys.
Or don't. And you'll see a lot more of Johnny when Solio goes live. So you can follow Solio Analytics on all useful platforms, and YouTube content and others will be coming soon, I'd imagine.
Yeah, in the works.
That is all on its way as well. So thank you very much for joining us, and I guess we'll catch you on the next one.
See you
Cheers,
soon.
guys.